I'm Jen Gurecki. I'm the CEO of Coalition Snow. I'm the human who posts a lot in the clubhouse and pings you a lot. So that's me. Thanks for being here tonight. And I'm just going to turn it over to Deenaalee and Micheli to facilitate the rest of the call. So welcome everyone. Thanks for being here and really looking forward to this event.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much, Jen. And thank you, Hodgdon and everybody for joining us tonight. It is pretty exciting to see that we have 39 participants, which is a pretty large crew. Jen and I were on a conversation earlier and we ended up having, I think, like 10 people, which it was an amazing group. And I think everybody that's, tuning into these conversations is excellent. And I get really energized when there's a really large group. So maybe we'll just do quick introductions, Micheli, and then we can go from there. So Adet, Deenaalee Hodgdon Eja, Melinda Chasingong, David Hodgdon Sato, Githarn Deg Xit'an Dené Nana Listo. Hi everybody, my name is Deenaalee Hodgdon. I am Deg Xit'an Athabaskan and Sugpiaq from the villages of Githarn Deg or Anvik and South Naknek in on the Yukon River and in Bristol Bay. I am currently the executive director of On the Land, which is an Indigenous media collective centering Indigenous voices and our relationship to the land. I'm a commercial fisherwoman, and I am recently brought on as an ambassador for Coalition Snow. And I wear a few other hats, but we're going to leave those ones off in this conversation. So, Micheli, what about you?
Okiwa. Taniko Micheli Oliver. I am currently on Ute lands, unceded Ute lands, and I've grown up just a couple hours northeast of here on Cheyenne, Ute, and Arapaho lands. I am from the Niitsítapi Blackfeet peoples, as well as the absentee Shawnee peoples on my dad's side. And yeah, I think that's everything right now. I'm a backcountry skier, photographer. I am, let's see what else. Adventure photographer, backcountry skier, climber, mountain biker, geographer. I am the research director of Native Land Digital, which is hopefully where you guys all got your land acknowledgements this evening. If you haven't checked out Native Land, it's native-land.ca. Pretty simple. You can drop a pin and figure out whose lands you're on. So yeah, I often tell people I'm a visual geographer for that reason. So that's just a snippet. I usually forget a lot of things in my intros, so I'll start later.
Yeah, I feel like we both do, Micheli. And at this point, Micheli and I have done so many things together that I feel like we can kind of do our own intros. Something that I usually forget, but it's because I am still getting used to highlighting this, is that I use they, them pronouns. And then I'm also calling in from, you heard it in my Indigenous introduction, which is in Deg Xit'an, the language, but I am on Deenaalee, which means the land of the Deenaalee people in Anchorage, Alaska. So Micheli and I were talking before this conversation, and we are really excited. I think we've both been having a lot of conversations around diversity and equity and inclusion and the Indigenous Backcountry Fund. So we were kind of wanting to get a gauge around how many people have heard of the Indigenous Backcountry Fund. And if you can just raise your little hand in the reaction, and that will kind of allow us to see how many people have heard about it and how much we really need to speak to it this evening before we can kind of launch into some of these other discussions that we would really like to be having with you regarding Indigenous people in the outdoors. Great, so I'm seeing a few. You can also nod your head or do a little dance or a little shimmy. Excellent, so I'm seeing, what do y'all think? Do you think we should give a quick little synopsis of it? I think so. Yeah, Micheli, do you want to launch in?
Well, I just wanted to point out and kind of say that Deenaalee and I are both really passionate about having this be a conversation with everyone involved. So we'd love for this to be, like us talking as much as you guys talking, and us just kind of like getting questions, answering questions, and having this be everyone contributing. So yeah, I want someone else to go.
Well, I can kind of launch in and talk a little bit about the Indigenous Backcountry Fund, but something that Jen and I covered in our earlier panel discussion was kind of our origin stories. And so, Micheli, I feel like it's important to kind of maybe highlight how you and I met and how we got connected to Coalition Snow. So Micheli and I actually met through Instagram. I think Micheli ended up messaging me, and we have a lot of mutual connections through Natives Outdoors, which is the brand company that Micheli is an ambassador and athlete for right now, and does a lot of photography work. And I have been in conversation with Natives Outdoors on and off throughout the last few years. But we first met during Outdoor Retailer in 2020, so almost like right just a year ago. And our first really big adventure was actually down in Taos, doing a ski trip together, where we were able to get on some skis and do this great little backcountry adventure there on Pueblo lands. And it was actually one of my first touring experiences on a pair of super heavy skis in a pair of alpine boots, which I had blisters for weeks afterwards. So really where I was coming from, the Indigenous Backcountry Fund, which we'll get a little bit more into, is kind of like this idea around, accessibility to gear and accessibility to the outdoors through this great thing that we call skiing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something that from day one, Deenaalee and I have really been passionate about. It's that we feel alive and happy and grateful and full of gratitude whenever we're backcountry skiing and when we're on the land in that way. And I think as Indigenous women, it's like a really special connection to water while you're hiking through on the snow. And it's something that's super important to both of us, and definitely like from day one, we've just been like, let's freaking ski together. And our first adventure and our favorite adventure up until hopefully we get some more in the future has been skiing, and has been moving through water in that form. So yeah, that's kind of the origin story, and we want other people to experience that, and other natives to see this place as we do when you're in the backcountry, and get to move slow like you do on touring skis, because it's a beautiful slow motion, and I think you just get to know the outside, get to know all of our plant relatives, and so much better on such a more intimate level.
So we kind of got connected to Coalition Snow through and started this initiative with Coalition Snow when I was brought on as an ambassador, and kind of actually I just asked Jen, I was like, hey, can I be an ambassador? After a few conversations that we had together. I'd sat on a few panels for Coalition in the past, and then got highlighted on Juicy Bits for the work with On the Land. And then through like the ambassadorship, I just asked Jen, I was like, what would it look like for us to just do an Indigenous backcountry fund or an Indigenous ski fund? And Jen was like, yes, let's do it. Literally had it up within 24 hours or something along those lines. And right away, it just felt like, Coalition Snow had this, they were just able to come in and see this vision, even though we hadn't fully like flushed out what the vision is. And to be honest, we're still flushing it out right now. What we would like to see at the end of the day is more people that look like us, more Indigenous women, more Indigenous non-binary folks, more like people of color in general on the ski slopes, whether that is like at the resort or in the backcountry. But really, one of my one of the biggest things that I've struggled with as an Indigenous person is just the overall accessibility to the sport of skiing. I started, my mom put me on my first pair of skis at the age of 6. I grew up as a low income person in Fairbanks, Alaska, where if you've ever been to Fairbanks, there's not a lot of mountains, but we do have some low lying hills. So I grew up on, okay, Micheli.
Beautiful. Lots of trees.
I grew up on what most people would consider a bunny hill. But it is a fantastic bunny hill that's full of plenty of tree runs. And, I feel grateful that there was even a little bit of elevation that I could get on when I was younger. And from that first time, being at that young age, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with being outside for the most part. Like, I skied in -20 below, which is pretty damn cold. So when I started skiing down here in Anchorage and in the lower 48, skiing at 0 degrees, at 20 degrees feels like heaven. But it was a sport that really captured me, in part because I looked up to my mom and my uncle, who both were able to be involved with skiing through one of our Alaska Native corporations up here. And really that program that she was involved in at the age of 12 was a program that was created very much as you can think of it as an affirmative action program. How do we get kids on the slopes that are Native? And so now, this Indigenous Backcountry Fund really feels like the next generation of, again, how do we make the sport more accessible? Because I was just talking to her earlier and she said, Deenaalee, it's been 43 years since I was out on the slopes like that. And we're going to be going skiing next week for the first time for a consecutive amount of days. That's going to be the first time that my mom has been able to be on a pair of skis in a consecutive period of time since she was 12 years old. So what would it mean to have multiple generations of Indigenous people being able to be out on the slopes, being able to to be in the backcountry and, like Micheli said, experience our lands, our stolen lands, in the way that so many people of higher income and higher affluence, usually white, get to experience. And I know we saw a question. I want to flag that somewhere.
I think it was Tracy, if you want to ask.
Yeah. I can just keep rolling as well. I'm a podcast.
I also, Tracy, if you don't want to ask your question, or you don't have it anymore, I can interject. I think this is a really cool part about Deenaalee and I's relationship in general. I am a 3rd generation Indigenous skier, so I have the almost example. I am the example of what can happen. And what you can become if you have examples of Indigenous people in your life, skiing and taking you into the slopes. My grandfather skied and was a damn good skier, and my dad skied. Granted, both of them skied in jeans. Both of them were scrappy as heck, but they both skied, and they knew it was important for me to ski. And so that truly has been their ceremony and their way of connecting to the land for a long time. And now I've been able to ski since I was 3, and I'm a professional ski photographer, and I've been able to really expand in my career. And now I'm telling the stories of other Native people skiing. And that to me is just such a prime example of what does it mean to think about 3 generations down the line, what will my Native kids be like, my Native grandkids be like, and how will they be able to connect to skiing in this beautiful way.
One thing, Deenaalee and Micheli, that we were talking about in one of our meetings around the scholarship was how things could look differently in, say, avalanche education if you had Indigenous people as the instructors. And I'm curious if the two, which is just so that everyone knows, that's one thing that the funds that are raised through this initiative will go to support people in Indigenous people in becoming those instructors and guides. And I think that that's something that would be really interesting for this group to hear from the two of you, of how would avalanche education look different, or what vision would you have for it if Indigenous people were the ones who were helping to create the curriculum and or facilitate those courses?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Deenaalee and I talked about this a bit earlier. I think something like we've both thought about a lot is how we approach our time spent, not only on our own homelands, if we're skiing there, but on other people's native lands. And it's definitely a different approach, I think, a lot of times. I acknowledge when I'm a guest, like right now, I'm on Ute lands and I'm a guest here. And I treat these lands with full accountability and respect that Ute ancestors have been sown into the soils below my feet. Every single time I ski, I think of that respect. And if I don't respect the lands and respect the ancestors of this lands, it's bad medicine, which means, it's not good for you. And I can notice when I don't go about it in a good way. And I think as an avalanche instructor, you're dealing with an extremely dangerous force. And you're also in these crazy energetic hubs, AKA mountains, where we are trying to learn to respect, and we're figuring out how to be on these lands. And lots of people approach it, especially avalanche professionals, approach it from a very singular ideology of, this is how you mitigate the slope, this is how you do this is how you do this, And yes, that all of those things are super important, from mitigating the slope to detecting the danger, to predicting, to dealing with if a slide happens, from that whole long list of things. I also think that it's important that we acknowledge that there's spirits on these mountains, there's energy in these mountains that we don't quite understand. And if we don't go about it in a good way, then it's not going to be good for us. So I don't know if you want to add in there, pitch in there.
Yeah, I have a lot of different feels about this. I grew up learning about learning styles first and foremost. So thinking about, how first and foremost, how education is dispersed. And I have to say, I've never taken a ARI course. I've never taken an avalanche education course. I've been able to read a little bit here and there, but that definitely goes to this conversation of accessibility of time, and then also of finances. And so I can't speak quite so to the curriculum, but I can imagine, just from a last partner that was taking the course, there's not traditional ecological knowledge that is involved in any avalanche course. And so for me, what would involving traditional ecological knowledge around snow science, what would that look like in a AVI course? For me, that would look like learning the different forms of snow, not just by their composition and by the different layers, but being able to name that by like the indigenous names. Sami people have over 200 different types of names for snow. The Sami people are the indigenous people of Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Inuit people up here in Alaska, Greenland, and Canada have, I think, over 20 different names for snow as well. So there's so much traditional ecological knowledge that can be embedded in just your basic class, alongside some of those different learning styles. So thinking about accessibility, how do we teach in a way where people are going to be able to learn through their auditory, kinesthetic, visual, a few other learning styles. The other thing that really comes to mind that Micheli was kind of speaking to with like these energetic fields is the stories of the mountains that we are in. So from a anthropological, so I have my background in anthropology, and Micheli has her background in geography. What does it mean to be thinking about the geographies that we are experiencing from their traditional, like from the Indigenous perspective, as well as from like maybe even an anthropological perspective, and really having that social science aspect interwoven, so that when you're coming out of some of these courses where it is snow science, you're also understanding, again, the lands that you're playing in and the stories that go along with them. That includes the traditional names of the mountains. That includes on top of the traditional names of the land. That includes maybe some of the Indigenous stories that go around them. What is the creation story? You know, I'm named after the tallest mountain in North America. And the first ascent was by an Indigenous man. That is huge. Not a lot of people know that about the mountain of Deenaalee, and what would it mean for like young people or people of color and Indigenous people to see that representation from the beginning. So I think there's a lot of stories, both within an Indigenous context as well as within a non-Indigenous context, that could be more involved in order for us to have a more holistic understanding when you go outside and when you're recreating on land, or when you're in the backcountry, or when you're at a resort, of the place and space that you're engaging in. And you know, resorts within themselves, there's a whole conversation around the commodification of those landscapes, and you can look at Flagstaff, I believe, for an excellent debate around skiing and Indigenous communities, which I know Native Lands has worked on quite a bit.
Yeah. And I think something that I just kind of thought of, and it's really, really interesting, is you know, when you are learning about the people of a place, when you are essentially, you know, in English, personifying an area, then you start to realize, and you start to get that the outside, like the natural world, the wild, are not so different from people. You know, we're not these two separate entities, like humans are over here and everything else is over here. It's all interwoven, you know, and Indigenous peoples and our fingerprints are everywhere that we walk, you know, especially when we're in the wilderness. Indigenous fingerprints are there, and people are woven into these lands. And so if you go out skiing and you're taught avalanche safety by an Indigenous person, and you start to see, like when you're hiking up next to a tree, you're like, oh wow, this you know, this was some type of important medicine, or this peak is called, you know, Mount Rainier is actually Tacoma, a bunch of other names, but Tacoma is the one I know. You know, those kind of things, right? You start to understand that, and you start to see like, oh wow, like this mountain means water. It means, you know, it means our life, our livelihood. It's so much more than just this thing to go summit and send hard on, you know.
Sorry. I have this, you know, when you're talking, Micheli, about gathering medicines and being on the mountain, I think one of the things that brought me so much joy when we were on our Taos trip was skiing with Connor Ryan for a little bit, and he was teaching me about one of the traditional medicines that grows on the trees in that area. And I was able to find a relative of that medicine here in Alaska. And so thinking again about, you know, maybe it's not just about the mountain, as we were talking about. It is about these other plant and animal relations, as Micheli has already mentioned, that bring us into relationship to the land in so much more of an intrinsic way, and then also connect us to our relatives across Turtle Island or across the world. This is kind of a side note, but I think about a lot of times like the Indigenous people of Nihon, or Japan. And when I was studying Japanese, I was so blown away by the similarities in Deg Xit'an Athabascan, and the similarities in some of the Japanese words, and I believe it's Ainu people, their language subset. It made me wonder what kind of, again, traditional ecological knowledge might be embedded in our languages that connected us across the ocean and to this Pacific sphere. And we're both we're all snow people, and we're both people of kind of the ocean area. So there's so much to learn that's there, that again, if we tap into our traditional ecological knowledge and the geographies of understanding, really the mapping of our Indigenous worldviews, re-emerging from these colonial narratives, how much more opportunities we have to bring understanding of one another and of the landscapes around us, that when you're just out there and you're just looking after bagging some peaks, you might not know otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Just like the interconnectedness that we all have. I think that's something I've been thinking about a lot is, when we say you are on native land, or we say land back, or all those things, it doesn't mean like, hey, leave, go back to Europe. That's not what we're trying to say. It's more just like, hey, we can't gather our medicines on these lands, and we want to do that again. And I think that concentration on the interconnectedness of all of us, whether or not that's the Ainu people in Japan, all the way to Dené or Deg Xit'an, like all of the connections in between. And I think even our non-native relatives have those connections with us as well. And I think concentrating on that and thinking of that is important within this fight for lack of a better term.
So we have a question here from Erica in the chat. What is your go-to resources to learn Indigenous history, knowledge, and stories of the lands you are recreating in? So
loaded question. Okay, Deenaalee and I love books, and just like this question is yeah
that's one box.
Yeah. Okay, well, so first book that you should probably read, and I mean Deenaalee might have a different book, but my personal go-to, and I think a lot of natives love this book too, is Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Kimmer. That book to me is like coming home. Like, it's like I've literally probably read it like 15 times and then audiobook listened to it. Robin actually she records her own book, which is super cool. So that book is amazing because that Deenaalee had earlier mentioned traditional ecological knowledge. And if that's a new term to you, this book is extremely enlightening as far as what that all means. What is traditional ecological knowledge? What does that mean to a native scientist? And where does science and Indigenous knowledge cross? And where does Western science miss and Indigenous knowledge fill in? And what has Indigenous knowledge found first and discovered first that Western science is later like, oh, actually, you were right. Yeah, and it's just a beautifully written book. So that's my number one recommendation.
Yeah, I think, Jen, we did have a suggestion for writing names, and I was wondering if we're listing resources, if you could help us do that, so then we're not missing stuff, because I'm going to rattle off a few names. I think an important thing to say about braiding sweetgrass, and this just came up because my friend Haley Hannah Stepatin, she's Yunangach, or Aleut, from the chain out here in Alaska. And she's writing her PhD right now specifically on mapping and mapping Indigenous imaginaries and territories and geographies through tattoos. So be on the lookout for her work. But
say her name again for me, please.
Haley Hannah Stepatin. So
I'm not going to get that. It's
not. Maybe we just do her Instagram. It's Indigenous Agent. I can like look up what it actually is.
Okay.
Braiding Sweetgrass came up in her stories. So if you do follow her on Instagram today, and something that she points out about braiding sweetgrass is a lot of the times, like, it's a great introduction, and it is fantastic in terms of really bringing people in a very accessible and tangible, and like, okay, if you are non-Indigenous, you can connect to this book because it is easy to read. And she does, like, she really this is maybe me being too critiquey at this point. But one of the things that Haley Hanna pointed out is that sometimes, especially with white women, and I'm going to say this because this audience is mostly white women, do not let it be your excuse to move towards innocence. Do not let it be like your book to say, oh, I've read Braiding Sweetgrass and now I know everything. So some of these resources that I'm going to add on after, like if Braiding Sweetgrass is your introduction to Indigenous policies and theory and traditional ecological knowledge, that's just one toe in the water. You have a lot of work to do afterwards. And so some of these resources are like the baseline of my education and kind of like what I put on my proverbial bookshelf, which is in boxes right now, because I just moved. But first and foremost, read Decolonizing Methodologies by Linda Tuiwai Smith. If you're thinking about doing any kind of like policy work or government work, or you're creating an organization or you're creating a business, doesn't matter. Decolonizing Methodologies is like the 101 of how you practice decolonial thought. Number 2, Decolonization is Not a Metaphor by Tuck and Yang. Eve Tuck is another Yunanga amazing scholar. And I believe, I can't remember exactly where Yang is coming out of, and that is on me. But Decolonization is Not a Metaphor is also a one-on-one on saying we are not speaking about decolonization or decolonial practices in a metaphorical way. We need to be seeing real institutional, real embodied change at every cellular level. So those are my main 2. Another one, and I'll stop at 4 because otherwise I could keep going. Another one is going to be As We Have Always Done. And that is by Leanne Bedosamasaki Simpson. Leanne is Nishnabeg from the Great Lakes region. And As We Have Always Done was the baseline for like all these books were, but As We Have Always Done really spurred my work with On the Land. So if you read that, you'll kind of get like this foundational understanding of really where I'm coming to my work around storytelling with. And then the last one, and I have it right here, is, and for those of you that are, think about the North and think about snow, I'm sure you'll love this book. It's Tanya Tagaq's Split Tooth. And the reason why I'm putting this on our like 101 lists right now is because here, I'll read you the first part. It says, fact can be as strange as fiction. It can also be as dark, as violent, as rapturous. In the end, there is no difference between them. And what Tanya Tagaq does so brilliantly in this is she delivers a memoir of her experience that when you read it, it is so encapsulating of an Indigenous worldview that is both grounded in the spiritual and grounded in the very real, tangible world that we're living, or that most people are living in, that it really makes you think about what does other ways of being or interacting with our physical realm feel and look like, and how can we really decenter linear thought practices. So if any kind of like Indigenous thought practice is not coming to our work, we're not coming to our work in a linear fashion. Linearity is very much a Western way of thinking, X, Y, Z. Indigenous practices are very holistic. Most of our, if you look at our architecture, it is very much done in a circular or spiralic method. So when we're thinking about decolonization, think about a circle and think about like, things don't necessarily exist in this XYZ plane. Anyway.
Yeah, those are all amazing books. Decolonizing Methodologies was like my just guide all through college, especially being a geography major, which is, mapping is something that could be detrimental to Indigenous people. So that was something I just like referred to all the time. Really good one. Another one I wanted to add, and this doesn't necessarily have to do with like education about like what we were kind of talking about with like TK and that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of like Indigenous futurisms or kind of like sci-fi, Indigenous sci-fi books, which I think are really cool to kind of read. And some of them talk about really hard things, and some of them talk like celebrate Indigenous joy. And one of my favorite ones that talks about Two-Spirit folks is Love Beyond Body, Space, and Time by Hope Nicholson. And that one's I think the description is actually Indigenous LGBTQ, I think it says it's like Indigenous anthology or something like that is where it goes. And it's a bunch of different stories kind of strung together. And I think it's a really important one to read. And again, like Deenaalee was saying, put your brain in a totally different way of loving and thinking and relating to your body and to your relatives and to your loved ones, and to your own identity as a human being, especially if you are LGBTQ. Yes.
We have a question, and I think Jill's question really ties in well to, you brought up these two books, Decolonizing Methodologies, and decolonization is not a metaphor, this concept of decolonization, which I don't know how many people here on this call are really familiar with what that is, but I think that Jill's question might speak to that a little bit. In Jill's question, she says that she really appreciates your perspectives, and she's wondering if both of you have thoughts on how non-native backcountry skiers and explorers seeking connection and context with the land can do so that does not feel appropriative. So if you're non-native and you want to sort of lean into this, like what would that look like in an appropriate way? And for me, like what I want to kind of add to that, like, does that include this concept of decolonizing our experiences, our language, the way that we speak about things?
Yeah, I think I want to be clear that every single human being has the opportunity and the ability and should decolonize themselves and their minds and their bodies and their spirits. Decolonization is not something that's just for Native people. This is something that if everyone in the United States or Turtle Island would learn to decolonize, then we'd be sitting in a very different place. And us as Native people, we can't decolonize without our non-native relatives. We can't. So as far as tangibly what this looks like, I think I can speak more to kind of what first came to my head is more what it doesn't look like. Deenaalee and I have talked a little bit about medicines, right? So what it looks like, what it doesn't look like is collecting those medicines. If you're white and you burn sage, that's not being a good ally accomplice to us. That's really appropriative and frustrating for us and traumatizing. Then I was talking about some other Indigenous medicines on the trees. There's a couple of them that are native to certain areas that. Can you guys hear me? My connection says it's unstable. Okay. But yeah, it looks like not collecting those things that aren't, and I guess I'll put some perspective to it. A lot of Native people have been kind of systematically separated from collecting different medicines on homelands. Pretty much, I mean, it's diabolical, the system that has created so that Native people are separated from those lands. Can't pick grass for basket weaving, can't collect medicines for health and well-being. And so that to me is something really important when you're seeking connection with the backcountry, with these lands. If you're taking from these lands, especially if you're taking medicines that are Indigenous medicines, that doesn't sit well with us, and that's way more hurtful than productive. And as far as like what it looks like to seek connection, it looks like doing your research on who came before you on this lands. I think that's something that native land, the
website I work for, an organization I work for, that's something we really hope that when people look at our map, when you click on the pin, you click on whose land you're on, you're not just stopping there. You're clicking on the link, you're looking at the lands, you are learning more about who came before. And so I think that gives you a different perspective on the lands, is learning what we were talking about before, with learning who came before you. And I think that is a meaningful connection, because going out and just looking at the views and the plants and everything, that's not enough, because there are people that are sown into this soil, and you probably won't be able to have a good connection with the land until you learn more and you understand and you advocate. Like if you have a home mountain, work to advocate for Native folks to, like ask them what they need first off. But I'm thinking about the Ute people here, and it's if Ute kids want to get out and ski, then figure out how to get Ute kids to ski. That's another reason this Native Backcountry Fund is so important in a lot of ways, because skiing has become this like white person sport. And so even if you have the money, then the ability to do it, it's scary to be the non-dominant persons on a mountain or on a slope. Deenaalee can probably speak more, fill me in with the gaps there.
Yeah. If you noticed, I did not say what medicine I was speaking to, and that was very intentional. I almost did. I almost said it, and then I was like, you can't do that. And I, hopefully at some point, I won't have to censor myself, because there will just be an understanding of the boundaries that are established and the boundaries that should be respected, and the places of consent, that people understand that they need to ask permission. But I know that right now we're not there, because a lot of the times we're having the one-on-one conversations. And what's exciting about that is like we have this place where we can learn with compassion and understanding. And one of the things that I really like to point out, because unfortunately in the outdoor industry, we have seen a lot of cancel culture, is the fact that, we are all, like Micheli said, on some level decolonizing. And so as we are each decolonizing, like we're each peeling up these layers, whether that is layers that have been put on to us as Indigenous people from 5 centuries of colonial rule on our lands and the traumas that come with that, or we're peeling back the layers of saying, oh my goodness, I don't know where my ancestors came from. I know that they came from across the ocean somewhere, but like there's so much pain when it comes to not knowing who your people are. And I think that that's where a lot of this conversation around like this grasping that underlies appropriation really comes from, of saying like, well, I need I need some kind of culture. I don't have a culture. So what can I hold on to? So just really acknowledging that grief process and understanding, and then being accountable when you ultimately fuck up. And I know that this is a coalition snow call, so I feel comfortable saying that. I'm going to pivot because I feel like Micheli really answered that question fairly well. And highlight the question that we just got from Hannah, which is that Hannah works with young people outside, and what do we wish more young people were being taught about outdoor spaces and how we interact with them. I think baseline, inclusion, young kids are so malleable. What does it mean to create these spaces where each child, each person is really honored for the gifts and the enthusiasm that they hold? If a young kid is like, say you're all going out for a ski day, if one of your kids is so excited about birch tree bark, how do you just take a moment and say, okay, we had this whole thing planned today, but maybe this is a teaching opportunity to talk a little bit about this birch tree and what this birch tree is offering us right now.
I think that because that's going to not tell the kid like, hey, you're doing something wrong. Like, you're supposed to be on our schedule. Like, come on, let's go. Rather, you're taking the opportunity to learn in an environment in the outside, which is really wanting to offer those gifts. And then what does that allow you as an instructor or somebody that is at a different level of the learning stage to say, oh, hey, maybe next time, maybe if I don't know how to answer this question right now, I can learn about that birch tree and bring that into my next session with these youth. I think another thing, apart from just creating those inclusive, compassionate spaces, is really fostering a healthy competitive environment, but a not centering competition, because right now what we really need, I think, across the world is and I, that most people I think on here identify as either women or non-binary or trans folks. And so each one of us, I'm sure, have faced some degree of gender violence by being in spaces where we feel like, men are not letting us into the game or whatever, even though we are just as like, we can embody so much of the same ability to a certain degree. And there's a conversation about ableism there. But, what does it mean to be able to say, all right, let's have like some fun competition, but at the end of the day as well, like, how do we baseline root down into our relationships of respect for one another and our relationship for respect of the land? And then with leave no trace principles, where are those principles coming from, and how do those principles erase like Indigenous ways of being and other ways of being on the land that might not be centered in those leave no trace principles?
You want to get into that a little bit more, Deenaalee? Because I feel like leave no trace is something that probably so many people on this call have been indoctrinated with, and the conversation around how those principles are actually exclusive and white supremacist. It's a very new conversation. Do you want to just touch on that for a minute?
Yeah, Micheli, I'd be interested in hearing what you say, and maybe we could just like pinging off of this conversation, because I have my examples and I'm curious to hear what your examples are.
Yeah, I actually first wanted to kind of like quickly put something into the last question about working with kids. I think something that is super important in general is, focus on yourself and decolonizing yourself. Like if you have done the work to decolonize yourself and have those values like in your soul, then I think it'll really have impact on the kids. And it's not necessarily like you have to lay out this whole decolonized curriculum. It's like if you decolonize yourself, the kids are going to see that. That's really important. And then I think another thing too is get away from that hierarchy aspect of oh, I'm your teacher, you're my pupil kind of thing. I think one of the best teachers I ever had in my life was she sat down next to me in class and said, I learn as much from you as you probably learn from me. And that has stuck with me for my entire life because that to me, I was like, whoa, a teacher's learning from me. Like, and it just totally eradicated that hierarchy of like, wow, teachers are like the coolest things and I have to listen to them. And if you humanize yourself, I think that's really important. As far as leave no trace goes, it's a tough one for me because on one hand, I see the positive aspects of obviously not leaving your trash around the wilderness, of leaving a place better than you found it. I get those concepts. I definitely practice that ideology. And yet what leave no trace in some ways does is it points out that these wilderness spaces are these pristine, untouched places. That was a poem. But that's what it does. It's you want to make sure that the wild stays this almost anti-human entity, which completely erases Indigenous peoples, because if you view this wild space as a space that that has to be untouched and pristine. There's a lot of like anti-fire stuff wrapped up in Leave No Trace, and all these kind of concepts that you kind of think of when you think about Leave No Trace, that have almost they almost train your brain to completely remove things that are seen as I don't want to say ugly, because I don't view them as ugly. I'm thinking of specifically fire scars or those kind of things, where you see them like, oh, like that doesn't seem right, or picking a couple of grasses out of an ecosystem or whatever, like that doesn't seem right, or cutting down this tree, that doesn't seem right, like all of those things, right? Or leaving tobacco, or whatever it is. It's always just kind of this mentality of like, oh, that doesn't seem okay, and that's actually systematically something that makes you view Indigenous peoples as like, these ugly things that don't have any effect, that shouldn't have any effect on the wilderness, and are bad for it in some way, and it completely removes us from those spaces, and removes our relationship from those spaces, and then morphs your brain into viewing our relationship with those spaces as something negative. I was just spitballing there though, because I haven't really thought about that too much.
Yeah, let me see. I was just compiling a few other resources, and this one is from Sisu that I really like. That is by Dr. Kiona of now How Not to Travel Like a Basic Bitch. Piggybacking off of Micheli, and I'm so glad that you brought up fire practices, because I was 19 working in Deenaalee National Park for the first time as a cultural interpreter, the first time that I even heard of Leave No Trace principles. And I was like, you guys want me to do what? You want me to go out on the land and not start a fire to stay warm? I'm in Alaska. I'm on my own lands. Who are you to tell me not to start a fire if I'm going to be cold and in the backcountry? You want me to heat myself over a tiny little MSR stove that cost how much? I didn't know how to cook on a camp stove at all. I knew how to cook on a fire. I knew how to build a fire. Like, I know how to build a fire with a single match with some birch bark and stay warm. I know how to build a shelter out of moss if I need to, which would mean taking up, the land and basically scarring it or leaving some kind of trace. But that to me is being part of the environment. So as an Indigenous person, our traditional ecological knowledge and our traditional ecological practices recognizes that if we are doing some of these things like creating a fire, then that is part of our reciprocal relationship with the land if we are embedding it with our traditional ceremonies as well. So that's not me saying, okay, everybody, like, go to your national parks and make a fire. Not at all, because like that's not the place that we're at anymore. We are definitely at a place where I don't want you to go to Joshua Tree in the middle of the driest season and be burning Joshua trees. That's not what we can do. I don't want you to come up to Deenaalee National Park and start building fires in the backcountry, especially if you're not familiar with the environment. There's a certain level of like familiarity and understanding of the environments that causes that is necessary if you are going to, again, be part of it. And I think right now what we have to do when we're thinking about Leave No Trace principles and thinking about who it applies to and who it doesn't apply to is really this conversation around whose knowledge is being centered and then who oftentimes is being policed. So one of the articles that I included from Melanin Base Camp really speaks to the policing of brown and black bodies when it comes to Leave No Trace principles. So if you're somebody that is like even speaking to maybe some of these principles around like, planning and packing or not camping. I think one of them is like not camping on travel and camp on durable surfaces.
Well, if somebody hasn't spent a lot of time in the outdoor industry, like I said, I had only, been introduced to these principles at the age of 19. Somebody might not know. They might not know that they are stepping on, the soils in, what is it, like the soil in Utah, or the soil like in Ute lands that has that thin level of crust. They might not know that the tundra is an ecosystem that right now is like very, very, thank you. Yes, that word, cryptobiotic. They might not know that those are really fragile ecosystems. So how do we, again, come from that place of compassion, come from that place of like understanding that we are all trying to do the best that we can when we are speaking to some of these principles?
Yeah, and I think that goes back to call outs, too. Like, this is not a space. If we're trying to be inclusive in the outdoors, this is not a space to call someone out for not knowing about cryptobiotic soil. Like, this is a space to be like, my privilege has given me the opportunity to go to school and learn about this. And if you are okay with me like teaching you, I would love to. And that is key. If you are okay, that is the most important part of that sentence. We don't just want to be going around educating people if they don't want to be educated. Like, we want to be asking questions. That question, very important. Yeah, but I mean, snaps to everything Deenaalee said. I think the policing and the gatekeeping and all of that really just is again a part of that systematic separation and oppression of pushing BIPOC out of these outdoor spaces, because frankly, like, that's why we're all here. They're fucking great spaces and they're healthy and we love to be there and we feel good when we're outside and we're backcountry skiing and whatever else sports we do, or not sports, if we just go on walks, whatever movement you do outside, like, we feel good when we do that movement. And it's in our system. Like, I mean, there's countless ways that we could take this conversation that would go on forever. But there are a lot of intentional ways that Black and Brown folks have been separated from these spaces. And so their lack of education or lack of like knowledge of maybe like something like cryptobiotic soil is systematic. It's not because they don't care. It's like everyone is going to care about an ecosystem if it's fragile, if you explain, if you understand. I think that's really important. But I wanted to transition because this next question is really awesome. Deenaalee, did you see it?
I see it and I got really excited about it.
Fiona, thank you.
Say too that, so it is past 6:30 and I want to acknowledge the time. So as long as the two of you are okay with going over and answering this question, I think that would be amazing, but I want to honor your time. So are you cool with answering this question knowing that we're good?
Yeah, I think this question is really important. I'm totally fine answering it. Deenaalee, what about you?
I think you guys just saw us both get really nerdy about it. So.
No, I mean, it's like, Fiona, like, fucking snaps. Like, it's so important. Deenaalee, you go first.
Okay, I'm going to read you the question so that everybody can hear it read out loud, Micheli. This is just us, everybody. So, thank you so much for sharing. I just finished reading Decolonizing Methodologies with a book club at work and was actually thinking about a question for you based on something that Linda Tuiwai-Smith, I like calling her Auntie Linda, writes in the last chapter. She writes about how in a capitalist neoliberal world, the world is a marketplace and the issues related to the potential for traditional Indigenous knowledge to be commodified in those systems. I was wondering how you think of or consider that in relation to snow science and how to balance sharing traditional ecological knowledge in the field with the need to respect and avoid commodifying Indigenous knowledge. Solid question. Woo! We could write a whole entire dissertation on this. Micheli, do you want me to go first? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, you go for it.
Yeah. So again, this comes back to the fact that I did not share that plant with y'all earlier.
with our ceremonies and with our stories and with our songs, a lot of our songs, at least up here in Alaska, were, you could think about, I don't think there's a right word for it in English, but you can think about it kind of in the term ownership. So say I own a song and I'm in Anvik, and Micheli has a song and she's in Shagluk, which is a village that we are in relationship with. They're both Deg Xit'an Athabascan villages. If I go over to Shagluk and I say, hey, Micheli, I have this song for you. It's a song that my family, there's going to be an understanding that like this song is owned by my family or by me or by whoever, but there's a certain level of belonging is honestly a better word. So it belongs to my knowledge or my lineage. But I say, I want you to carry this song now. Can I sing it to you so that you can understand it and so that you can carry this song on? I would then share that song with the full understanding that Micheli understands that this song has been passed through my lineages, and now it is Micheli's responsibility to honor that song, to honor the lineage and what it has come from, and to honor the fact that they now have to carry it and understand that when they pass it on, they have to be very particular about who they're passing it on to. And there has to be a certain level of consent with the lineage that came before when that song is shared. So, I do a podcast, and one of the hardest conversations that I've been having to have with myself and with my advisory council and with my communities is, what do we share and what do we not share? Because again, we have to face things today such as commodification, acculturation, assimilation, appropriation, all the A's. Like there's a whole slew of things that come into this issue of, well, we live in a capitalist neoliberal world that basically just wants to make a buck off of the next great thing. And a lot of times, like, people don't cite their sources. And if your work is not cited or sourced, then of course, like, I, as a person that's sharing that work, is not getting paid or acknowledged for my knowledge or for my artwork or blah, 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 blah. So I think when it comes to snow science, we have the opportunity when we're creating, if and when we create this new curricula, and one of the things that we're doing is beginning to establish an advisory board for how these funds will be spent out. And that's going to include a lot of different Indigenous people from across Turtle Island or from across the United States. And so for me, when I think about that group of people, we're going to be able to think about, what do we want to share and what do we not want to share? What has already been written down in anthropological records? What can people already find access to on the internet that basically just needs to be compiled into these sources? So what has already been shared? And then if we are sharing those extra juicy bits of knowledge, with people, sorry, it's getting late. If we're sharing those extra bits of knowledge with people, what are the pieces of consent that we have to glean from our own individual tribes before we share them and put it into a piece of curriculum or put it into a book or whatever. So really it is on us and it's on our people, and to have those right relationships and to really respect what should be shared and what shouldn't be shared.
And I think that gets down to why it's so important to have Native people like teaching these courses. You mentioned like the snow science, right? And I think what's important about Deenaalee's story of a song belonging to their lineage, their family. I think what strikes me as so important about that story is that now that I have a relation with Deenaalee, I'm able to understand how important, how sacred all of these things with this song specifically. And so I get that I shouldn't write down the song and post it on my Instagram story. Like, I understand that because I have a relationship with Deenaalee. and Denaalee's family. And so if we're having an Indigenous person or multiple Indigenous people teaching a snow science course and helping to give a relationship with the people of the course and the instructor, and that will then help the attendees and the course members understand that this is something that has belonging to that Native person. This is traditional ecological knowledge that is important to that person and peoples, and this is why it's important not to commodify that. And you're humanizing it when you're taking these courses. Like, we're not posting this stuff. This isn't, and the way that I'm envisioning this isn't curriculum that we're going to like post online. This is going to be curriculum shared in a group setting, in a personable setting. And it's a lot harder to commodify things when a human being is sitting right in front of you and you are feeling empathy for them. You're making eye contact with them. You're understanding where they come from, who they are. And that's why that instructor position, that teaching that kind of relationship is so important. I mean, there's a lot of things that I could go on about this. I'll keep it short at that, because I think that's pretty much the most important part and the most relevant to this group. But I think that just even having that question in y'all's heads right now, how can we not commodify traditional ecological knowledge? I want everyone, when they see sage and Palo Santo and all those other medicines in plastic at Whole Foods, I want you to see that and be like, oh my God, this is what happens when TEK gets commodified. And this is like a business now that is selling medicines and selling traditional knowledge, and then decimating those plants and those relatives to do so. And yeah, so I think the most important part is to have that question in your brain.
Yeah. And I'm just going to add one little add-on. I'm not above a consent form. Having people that are non-Indigenous taking these courses, signing a consent form saying that they will not reproduce this knowledge in any written form. If they want to share it, then they can share it with their friends and relatives when they're out and just say like, hey, I learned this really cool thing about snow. Can I share it with you? Like, that's an oral form that we have always practiced of sharing knowledge. But if you're going to write it down, there's going to be a consent form and there's going to be legalities, because we're also contemporary Indigenous people and we function in a capitalist world. And
much as we wish we weren't, we do.
Yep.
We must.
And then, also, if you do have Palo Santo or if you do have sage and you're like, oh shit, I'm being called out right now, change your relationship to that plant, burn it with respect, do not throw it away. Let it go back into the earth. Make sure that you are using it because you bought it or because it was gifted to you. Honor it now, starting right now, and then don't buy it again.
Please.
Sorry, end of the day.
Oh, that's a really, really good point, though. Yeah, it's definitely way worse to throw those medicines away. Yeah.
I want to thank both of you so much. Like, is everybody else feeling like I am? Like, holy fuck, thank you for the last hour and 15 minutes, which is like some of the best time I've spent this week, this year, last year, my life. Thank you. Like, how we spend so much time being like, well, that's a fucking hour I'll never get back in my entire life. This is like, thank you for filling the fucking well. We all need it so much. And I want it. So just thank you so much. And I want everybody, there's still 45 people on this call. I want you to know that the Indigenous Backcountry Scholarship is there for you to support. So I'm going to put that link in the chat right now. And if you felt like you got a lot out of this experience, you can go put some money in it right now, because these two are going to do some fucking shit and we can make it happen. And it's just been like such a pleasure for me to be able to work with both of them. And I know you're laughing at me. Also, it's been a long day for me.
I'm like half crying, so it's fine.
And like, is it, like, it's like, is it only Wednesday? But I really want to encourage you to support this, to support the scholarship. I want to encourage you to share this link. 100% of everything that comes through this is going to go to this scholarship, and everything that we've discussed tonight is going to have financial resources put behind it. And the only way that we're going to be able to envision this future, or actually not envision, but make this future a reality that Deenaalee and Micheli have presented to us tonight, is to actually put fucking money behind it. So it's like one thing to be here tonight and one thing to learn. It's another thing to like put money behind it. So if you have the resources, if you have the means, I'm going to encourage you to do that. I also know that everybody here can share it as well. And just thank you to the two of you. I do want to honor your time. I want to just give you to the last, like, close. Now that I'm done, I'm going to step off my soapbox now and just take a seat. But if the two of you would like to close us out with anything that you'd like to share with the group before we say goodnight, I'm going to pass it back to you.
If you guys want more of Denaalee's beautiful thoughts and photos, and to see their gorgeous face and other amazing images, their Instagram is go_barefoot.
Wow, Micheli. And if you want to tune into Micheli's work, check out Mixtees on Instagram. And Micheli has even more amazing photography work because she's a photographer and she's putting out some badass stuff right now, both in terms of photography and writing. And then you can follow our work on the land. And we have some exciting projects that are coming up with that. But ultimately, thank you so much, Jen and Coalition Snow, for hosting this conversation, elevating these conversations. Thank you to each of you for being involved in these conversations, and also realize that like your network is the biggest, your community is the biggest resource that you have. And so being able to talk to other people about the Indigenous Backcountry Fund, especially everything that you've learned here tonight, like, please do that. Like, please spread it, share the love on Instagram or your social medias, and just spread the word, because, we're not in it for the short term, we're in it for the long term, and we're in it to create real lasting change and really be creating a community that is inclusive. So we want to see you on the slopes and we want to see us on the slopes. So let's create some stuff like that is beautiful together.
Yeah. Oh, also shout out to Ellen. Playing it relative over in the chat.
Ayo. Ayo.
Yeah, Hawak Sukapi, everyone. That means I give you my gratitude, my thanks. This conversation has been absolutely wonderful.
Yes, and I'll be posting the recording of this in the Clubhouse. It'll be tagged under Backcountry, so you can find it under that topic. And Jackie, I will attempt to transcribe some of these notes and get the resources in that. I mean, this is what I was doing, like on script, so I'll get that in.
You can also save your chats. If you like click the little ... button next to your name, you can save it. So that's also easier.
Yes. So I will make sure that we do that. And thank you everyone for being here tonight. Deenaalee and Micheli, just thank you for being incredible human beings who choose to show up in this world the way that you do and share all of this with us. Like we are better humans because of you. And snow sports in the outdoor industry is better because of you, and that probably needs to be said about 1 million times more. So I just want to say it now. This is wonderful. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. We'll see you in the Clubhouse, and we'll see you for our next Backcountry Beta event. So thanks everyone.
Bye guys.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone.